Hi guys and welcome back, and today we get on with painting the Kubelwagen. So you may recall at the end of the build video we'd got the car down with the primer on it and ready to go, and we start off this video with me putting on the grey, so the first coat of grey. So you'll see that I cleverly forgot to film just putting down an undercoat of, I think, the Rotbraun. So when I start doing the weathering and rubbing some stuff off, it should theoretically help to represent rust. So just a very light coat of the grey. I ended up putting a couple of coats on, but just wanted to build it up slowly and not necessarily too thick because I wanted it to be able to come off relatively easy. So onto the wheels, and I use German Ticker Black to do the wheels. I like the way it looks. It goes on very easily. Just spin the wheel around and trying to keep away from the hubs. When it dries, it feels to me like it's sort of got that faded rubbery look about it. So that's my go-to paint for rubber tyres. Just a few quick angles of the car once the grey paint's been put down. And all the other bits and bobs are mounted on their toothpicks, just to make it easier to handle it all. Getting the paint down on the timber on the floor was tricky. I couldn't get my head and my hand and the video camera all in the same place at the same time. So just some pictures as that evolved. And then for exactly the same reason, there's no video of the dash because I literally had to put the massive magnifying goggles on, and my nose, paintbrush, eyes, and the plastic part were about, I'm going to say, 2 centimetres apart from each other. So just a few stills as that unfolds, and have to say that I am really, really happy with how it came out. So well worth the effort, although I must admit when I walked out of the hobby room into the lounge room, I was blurry-eyed for about half an hour. But I had definitely gone cross-eyed doing this. And a couple of super close-ups with my ×15 macro lens is sort of incriminating because when you're zooming in that close you see some of the painting errors, but if you forgive those, still really, really happy with the way it turned out. I love the dial in the middle, the decal, and even the gear shifting decal onto the left. I think they really, really look good. And they are noticeable with just normal vision from a little bit of a distance, so it does make it worthwhile. And I just used a little bit of the canopy glue to give that sort of glass lens look to the central dial on the dashboard. So continuing on with the other bits and bobs, just a few stills here as you start to see the evolution of some washes and trying to bring out some texture and some different tone in the seats, etc. And again, as I said earlier, just gradually building it up, and some trial and some error. More error than trial perhaps, but just play around with it until you get what you're looking for. With the seats and the canvas roof cover in particular, I went with the wet palette and just used a lot of natural colours and a lot of blending along the journey to start to build up different looks and tones. Now I'm just building up colour on the car seats and the canvas roof cover and working my way through all the various bits and bobs. And for me, there's no formula for this. I just use all the sort of natural colours that I can think of and just keep playing around with it till I land on something that I think looks okay. So it would be a very painful and long tutorial because there could be dozens of colours all mixed together to come up with what this lands on in the finish. And I think if you're happy with it, whatever you're doing, then stick with it. I'd never try to convince you to follow this process because I can barely follow it myself most of the time. It's just experimentation and different washes and different thicknesses and different mixings, and at the end of the day, I reckon it looks alright, so happy with that. And as you can see on the wet palette, that's just blending different tones, especially for the canvas roof. I just wanted to see what I could do, just kept adding colours and washes until I landed on something that looked pretty good. And here just running some acrylic washes over some of the surfaces for the seats and the canvas, just to start to get some shadows and depth. And also a little bit of dry brushing with some stone grey acrylic. And then just picking out the straps on the canvas roof tarp cover. I haven't settled on a word so far. I doubt I will. And now just working through and picking out some of the various bits and pieces and some of the detail along the way, getting close to having it finished to the end of stage 1 though. So out with the Tamiya thin, quick drying, and starting to stick all the bits and pieces on. So I'm with the wheels at the front, and I just wanted them on a little bit of an angle, so nothing spectacular, and they're pretty flexible. So, and in fact, one or two have come off during the subsequent painting from this point, and they go back on very easily, so no great drama there. And now just gluing on the canvas roof cover in its rolled up form on the back. And just a minor tip, when you're painting bits and pieces before they're glued together, make sure that you just scrape off the paint at the contact points so that the glue does its work and helps to fuse the plastic together. Otherwise, look, it'll still work, but it won't be as strong a bond, and you can also get some messiness with the paint actually bleeding and smearing. So just a little tip. Clean it off and you get a better grip. So these tiny little fellas are, I fully imagine, the motors for the windscreen wipers. And because I've got a couple of good shots on the inside and I see that in almost every case there's some cable coming from there and disappearing under the dash, I thought I'd replicate that if I could. So needed to drill a couple of very tiny little holes to have a home for some cable to go into. And again, here they are with the I think it's 21 times. I should know this macro lens on the iPhone, and so they look ginormous. But trust me, when you try and stick the tiniest little wire in there, they're not ginormous at all. Now, this might be useful to some of you in looking for some very thin wire for the windscreen wiper motors. I had a look around with what I had, but nothing seemed quite right, and I found an old iPhone charger cable in amongst all my bits and bobs in the classic bottom drawer of rubbish, and I thought, well, there must be thin wire in there. So cut it open, and to my joy, there's lots of different sorts of wires that I think have got lots of potential uses in the future. So I used the thinnest of the thin that I could find, and it worked out quite well. But yeah, I was fascinated when I opened this up and saw the bounty for scale modelers that lives within. And if you have any sort of phone charger, I guess iPhone or Android, they're probably not dissimilar. And given we probably replace our phones every once in a while, a few years, there could be some good material lying around in your house that you can get your hands on. So here they are stuck into the actual little plastic parts for the motors, and then with both of them attached to the window frame. Almost at the end of part 1 now, getting all the decals on, which is pretty straightforward, so you can follow what's going here. I don't think it needs much in the way of explanation. So on with the decals, and nothing very exciting here, so might just have a little bit of music going while you watch those go on, and using the normal combination of solver set and the other one. I always get them mixed up, and I probably never use them in the right order, but it all seems to work. So have a look at this, back in a tick. So a few pictures of the decals on. They came up pretty good, actually. And now just tucking the wires under the dash for the window wiper motors. And now it's time to do a little bit of weathering. And two things happened here. One is I sort of accidentally found that the microsole, when I was doing the Panther tanks, made it easier to take some of the top coat of the paint off. Now, that wasn't necessarily great when I was doing the Panthers, but when I'm doing it consciously now, rather than using water, and I guess I get frustrated using water and feel that I have to use a lot of pressure to start to get through, and that often ends in tears by taking too much. Whereas this, I feel I don't have to use as much pressure and I can get subtler results. So anyway, you guys be the judge. The other thing that happened here, of course, was I realised that I'd forgotten to do a clear coat between the rust undercoat and the grey, which again wasn't a disaster because I didn't cut through too deeply. That's just my failing memory. I thought I'd done it and realised that obviously I hadn't. So I'm pretty happy with the chipping results, and as we have a look at this now, you might think, ooh, gee, you've gone a bit hard. And yes, if this was how I wanted it to be as an end product, I would absolutely agree. Gone way too hard. But you'll see in a second why I've done that. And because I want this Kubelwagen to look like it's been around the block many, many times, I started to do a little bit of roughing up, and I thought that side mirror and the other thing that's configured with it, which I truthfully don't know what it is. But anyway, I thought we could do without that, and might have a little bit of a home repair showing on that a bit later on with some wire to keep the window in place. And here on the back driver's side fender, I thought I might get the Proxon fired up to put in a nice little dent so I could get a bit of rust happening in there as well, just to give it a little bit of interest. And finally, just give it a blast with the dull coat, remembering to mask up the window because I didn't want that to get messed up by the seal. And you'd think that would be it, but no, like a set of steak knives, wait, there's more. So as I was painting the vehicle, a story started to sort of emerge in my brain about what was going on with it. And partly that was because the Tamiya kit doesn't come with any SS decals. And I don't know what I was thinking, but so it didn't dawn on me for a while until I realised that, hang on, I've actually bought special decals from Archer Fine Transfers to represent a specific unit, and I'm not using them. So that could have easily been just taken off, but I thought, now you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say this is a commandeered Kubelwagen, and that they have repainted it with camo and painted out all of the previous owners' decals and unit markings, and have then put their own on. So that led me into a second round of painting, but deliberately a attempt at trying to replicate a camouflage job done in the field. So not particularly fussy, imagining some troops who are not all that skilled and not all that interested, and just a bit of a rough job. So I wanted the combination of the camouflage plus the grey underneath that, plus the rust underneath that, to see if I could get some nice depth and dimension. So this is nothing you haven't seen before, so I think I might just shut up, and I'm sure you're all grateful to hear that. Whack some music on, and you can see how it unfolds. I'll come back when it gets to decal time, and because I really cocked that up, so I'll have to make a confession again about messing something up badly. All right, back in a tick. Now, peeling this masking fluid off, I found to be incredibly satisfying.
Shut that up.
You're shut up.
No, you're shut up.
No, you're shut up.
So on with the chipping, being extra careful to be a little bit gentler, so I could just get some really subtle variations in the paints that were coming off and what you could see underneath them. A couple of times I went right through to the white, not many, but they were really just then the landing place for a little bit of additional watered down rust, which sort of blended it all in together nicely in the finish. And now in the run to the finish, I'm really just in touch-up mode, so going back over the wheels with the German Ticker Black, but being really careful to try and leave some of the paint, the overspray from the hubcaps, just on the wall of the tile, so it's not a lot, but it just shows that there was a little bit of a lack of care with the field camo painting done. The Kubelwagen kit itself doesn't come with any SS decals, but the Tamiya Hanamag kit that I have does, so I thought I'd steal the license plates from those decals to use on this one. And as you can see, it's obvious that the rear rego plates are too big for where they have to go, so that was sort of like an executive decision. Well, I just need to cut them down, which means, as you can see, we lose the front 9 and the back 9 now. Whoa, settle down there, rivet counters. I know it's not probably historically correct to have a 4-digit rego number, but it's a field painting job, and maybe the guy couldn't count past 4. I don't know, I don't care. It looks good, and I'm happy with it. That also meant I had to trim off the front license plate to fit, and that was just a matter of being very careful with the very sharp razor blade, slicing it up and putting it back on in 2 parts. Almost indetectable even at very close range. And then tragedy struck. I was all excited. I got my Archer Fine transfers out and opened up the packet, and I've used them before, so I had a look and I thought, hang on, Woody, the owner of, where's my little piece of decal paper that I'm supposed to burnish these things onto? And it wasn't there, so I thought, that's not good. So I stole the little piece of decal paper, so the wet transfer medium, I think it's called, from one of the other packs and burnished on my tactical symbols. Excellent. Stuck it in the water, and when it came to take them off, they just crumpled into a sad little ball of wet transfer medium things. And I was horrified, and how's this happened? What the hell's going on? And then I took a closer look, and all of the other packets I've got have the wet medium paper, but the tactical symbols are dry transfers. You don't put them onto decal paper, and, well, I can't even show you any evidence of my failure because they just crumpled into a tiny little ball, and that was a bit tragic. So I haven't got any tactical markings on them, and I'm upset about that, but oh well. In the scheme of things, it's probably a small debacle. I could try and hand paint them. I might still try and hand paint them, but I can't deal with it right now. So let's see what happens when the dio unfolds. Yeah, very disappointing. So having recovered from that debacle and sulked for about a week wondering what I was going to do, I decided to print out my own decals, which came out pretty well, I think, and there's some on this page that I'll use on the 88 gun itself. And the rest, 1 or 2, I printed out different sizes because it's a little bit hard to tell what's going to work and what's not just from the screen. And as you can see, they just used a couple at the front, one on the side, and the license plate numbers, and that all seemed to work pretty well. So I recovered from my depression on messing up the dry transfers. So we're in the home straight now, and then it was just a matter of putting on a nice gloss coat in preparation for the weathering. And I did the weathering using artist oil paint, so you can see here on the silver foil, just so the oil doesn't dry up too quickly. And then just using a reasonably small brush, I think that's an O or a double O, just putting a few dots on here and there, and then coming back in with a dry, larger, softer brush to start to blend it all in. Not being overly careful to necessarily stay on the acrylic base colour, just sort of trying to get that tonal variation so it doesn't look uniform all the way around. And once the oil weathering was finished, then going back in again with another gloss coat, just to help seal all that in before I do the final bits and bobs with some washes. So off with the washes, and that's just a little bit of white spirits and just a small amount of the oil paint. So I want to have this as a fairly weak solution. I don't want the colour to be filthy, but I need to do this to help blend it in all together. And there's no right or wrong combination here. It's just a matter of what looks right to you, depending upon the scenario you've envisaged. This felt a bit too bright for me, so I just darkened it up and it looked pretty good after that. And then I just sort of splash it on fairly liberally once I get back onto the painting part. And now just a few pictures here with it post the wash and post now a dull coat going over the top of it. So nearly finished now and starting to look nice and blended from an overall perspective. So now the last little bit was to get the window back on, the front window back on. And because I'd snapped off that right-hand mirror configuration thing deliberately because I wanted it to look like it had a bit of a whack, the homemade remedy by the crew to secure it with some wire, and just required that little hole to be drilled and then fed through some of the wire that I got out of the iPhone cable, and tighten all that up, and it'll bend a little bit more and squeeze it up a little bit closer to the window later on, and it looks alright. Although I do realise that from an engineering point of view, there's no way that piece of wire, configured the way it is, would keep the window up, but it looks nice, so that's why I did it. So up to the last piece of the process, and that is doing the dusting with the pastels, and I just went in with a couple of different shades of brown here and there. Again, no science, just whatever looks good to you. You can use it to dull down some areas that you might have gone over the top with earlier, perhaps with the wash or whatever. I did that a little bit in the wheels on one of the sides, but otherwise it's just to simulate again a little bit of wear in places and get that tonal variation so it doesn't look sprayed on in a spray booth. And that's it. So we'll just do the traditional whiz around on the turntable a few times at different angles and have a look at how she came up. But from my perspective, building it, a typical Tamiya kit, it all went together really, really nicely. Yeah, there are a few little seam lines here and there, but nothing to get too stressed about. Delicate little kit to put together, so I was constantly knocking off those two open doors and the windscreen, which is why they sort of came in and out of different pictures along the way. But, probably should have just left them off right until the end anyway, as I ultimately did with the window when I put the wire connection through. So that was all good. I'll shut up, a bit of music, you can watch it spin around, and then some pictures towards the end, and I'll come back and say goodbye and let you know what the next part of this series will be. So that's it, guys. Just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to watch. Like if you like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed so you don't miss out on the next ones. Share, apparently that's a good thing. And as always, we'll look forward to reading your comments down below. The next stage of this day will be the base. I literally went out to buy the wood for the base this morning, and we'll probably make a start on it tomorrow. So hopefully it won't take me as long as this one. This one dragged on for a little while, but the base should be pretty straightforward, and get that up in the next couple of weeks. Again, thanks guys, and I will catch you in the next one.